Earth mysteries. Why did the ancients build sacred sites around our planet? The circles, the pyramids, the henge monuments, the standing stones. Why did they make massive use of crystals? Why do they construct layers? Why develop geomancy and use the same sacred geometry all over the world? These are the subjects we will define and explore in this program. This is the rollright stone circle in the countryside northwest of Oxford. The rollright stones are comprised of this circle here, a ruined dolmen structure in the field beyond the circle, as though the stones look as though they're leaning together, whispering together, and they're called the Whispering Knights. So the rollright stones, the whole complex of the site, represents one of the great legendary motifs associated with the prehistoric standing stones, and that is that they were once people that have been turned to stone for one reason or another. Another legend associated with this site is that the stones in the circle can't be counted. In fact, there have been 4 official surveys of this stone circle, and each survey has a different number of stones marked on it. This is probably because stones break off and other people bring stones from surrounding fields and put them into the circle. So there are many legends associated with this group of stones here. But the site has one particular modern claim to fame, and that is that it is the main field base of the Dragon Project.
Dragon Project, which I called after the energy of the dragon in traditional cultures like China or Wales. The dragon was always symbolic of the energy of the earth. It was always symbolic of veins of qi again, or veins of qi, which ran through the earth. In China, they actually called them dragon currents or dragon lines. Now, this idea of dragon energy, a bunch of us got together, scientists, chemists, physicists, psychologists, archaeologists, instrument makers, and people involved in ley hunting. Ley hunting, I should say, is based on the idea of ley lines, which is the straight alignment that you can draw between ancient sites, dead straight alignments that you can accurately plot on a very detailed ordnance survey map. And these straight lines usually run 3, 4, up to, say, 10 miles long. And they may be indications for navigation through the ancient landscape, as well as conduits of the earth energy itself, this dragon energy. Anyhow, the Dragon Project's primary task was to look and to see what are the geophysical variables of energy at a sacred site. What are the invisible influences of the Earth's magnetic field, of ultrasonic activity, that is very, very high-pitched sound, almost like a dog whistle. We find this sound is actually emitted when the sun comes up in the morning and hits the stones. A very complex reaction takes place in the stones, in the geological lattice structure of the stones, and emits this ultrasonic sound. We also are looking at the aspects of ambient radioactivity at these sites. How does this radioactivity influence consciousness?
The Dragon Project began in 1978, and it was set up to study the rumor that existed that sites such as Rollright and other megalithic sites in various parts of the world had curious powers or energies occurring at them. Various legends say that the stones have fairies and elementals living at them, that there are various curious enchantment properties. People can go into a stone circle and go into what we would call a time-space warp, but what the folklore traditions call enchantment. Also, various people have had curious anecdotal experiences at megalithic sites. They've touched stones and felt a shock coming off them. They've had curious psychic experiences. Throughout the 20th century, psychics have reported seeing strange beings, strange aura or field effects around stones, and these have been written down in many books and many journals over the years. Then in 1975, two scientists carried out work at a standing stone in Wales, and they used a magnetometer, and they found that the geomagnetism within the stone they were investigating did vary in an anomalous way. So there were various sources, from the scientific to the traditional and the folkloric, which said that these stones have curious powers. So in 1978 it was decided to put together a project to try and get a coherent look at this rumour. And it was decided that the project should proceed in two modes. One, looking at the stones using physical monitoring of various types, magnetism, radiation and so on. And the other was to use psychic work using dowsers, psychometrists and other sensitives, and to see if there was at any point during the research where perhaps these two modes could match up. We're a long way from achieving that yet, but we can see here at Rollright some of the examples of work that are going on long term at various stone circle sites. But this place is the key field base of the whole effort.
Well, it is very, very remarkable and notable how people who take up this sort of study and investigate ancient places or even visit ancient places do kind of develop a spontaneous different view of things in general, more in accordance with traditional or ancient view of things, as if these places do have a sort of message or something left in them which subtly alters the mind. But maybe not just even particular places, maybe the whole earth is like this. I think if you were to take a voyage and be on your own or be alone in some landscape, you begin to realize that human nature and such is actually an eternal thing. And these things have been experienced by people of all times. Because our relationships are defined. I mean, you hear the birds singing, the smell of the flowers, the smell of the country. It's all eternal. It's not, and it's the fact it's delightful does seem to show that we are made for this earth. You see, it's a sort of tailor-made thing for us, or rather, we're made together.
One of the people that's been working for a long while with the Dragon Project is electronics consultant Rodney Hale. Hello, Rodney.
Hello there.
Could you tell me what experiment you're carrying out here at the stone?
Yes. This is one designed to measure changes in the Earth's magnetic field as opposed to the static fields that the other magnetometers that we normally use will measure. It has 2.5 miles of wire in it and generates a small voltage if the Earth's magnetic field varies, and this is amplified and measured on a very sensitive meter that I have here. So we've got a very sensitive indication of changes in the magnetic field as opposed to the steady state readings that the ordinary magnetometers that you've been using for the other work. So it presents an interesting backup looking for variations in the magnetic field.
A sort of dynamic field.
A dynamic field, yes.
Yeah. What's happening here is that the tallest stone in the Rollright circle is having its magnetic field monitored. The probe is inserted into one of the natural hollows in the stone, and there is a magnetically sensitive transducer at the end of this probe here, seated well within the stone. A cable runs out to a monitoring device here, and a record is kept of the changes in the digital reading here, and this may go on for 20 minutes or half an hour per stone. These readings are taken all over the circle, different days, different weeks, different months, Those readings are then put through a computer which converts the readings to Gauss, which is the unit of measurement for the magnetic field. And what we're looking for are anomalous or unusual changes in the field of the stone. And here at Rollright, we have on occasion monitored some very sudden, very severe, quite remarkable shifts in the magnetic status of some of the stones. While this experiment's going over here on the north side of the circle, simultaneous magnetic readings are going on over on the southern perimeter of the circle. And we are interested always to compare how two stones monitored at the same time within the circle compare one to another, to see if there's a general change in magnetism or an individual change. A lot of the time there's nothing unusual to report. We're looking for those rare occasions when something odd does happen. Because of all this work that's been going on over the years, we're now very sensitive to changes in natural radiation at megalithic sites. Some occasions the radiation readings within the stone circle can double or treble, perhaps for 3 or 4 minutes at a time, and then subside and carry on as normal. Near the north side of the circle, we have a high radiation zone that always gives higher readings than anywhere else in the circle. We don't know what causes this. Some stone circle sites we find have lower radiation readings than their surrounding environment. Sometimes they're higher, sometimes they are quite normal.
Just as human beings have character, places have character. There is natural character to the landscape. People go to a certain place and feel bad or good at it. They feel uplifted, they feel depressed. And the character is brought upon by their personal interaction with the site and whatever things are happening in the site, such as the topography, the light, magnetic fields, electrostatic fields, the person's own state of health and so on. And geomancy is to do with determining the qualities of different sites and acting accordingly. You wouldn't place a house in geomantic tradition upon a site which is going to make people ill. You wouldn't either place it upon a site which had sacred energies, because you would be driven mad by hallucinations or by apparitions or by just being so charged up that you couldn't sleep, or you would become ill in some way. And so sacred sites have got this sort of character.
Now here we've got one of the longest running experiments of the Dragon project, the use of an ultrasonic detector. Ultrasound is sound beyond the range of normal human hearing, sort of sound that animals like dogs can pick up, and of course the sort of things that bats use to navigate by. And in fact, Charlotte, if I could just hold this a minute, this particular instrument is a bat detector that zoologists and ecologists would use when studying the behaviour of bat colonies. It's a wide range of ultrasound that it picks up, and we can adjust to the frequency of the sound. It usually is strongest during the February-March time of the year. It hardly ever occurs during midsummer period, and it is intermittent during the autumnal and midwinter period. Now Rodney is dowsing back across the whole circle, and his rods are indicating the flow of energy in the concentric rings found within the circle. It's interesting to know that what Rodney has just found here with his dowsing rods was confirmed a couple of years ago, in 1983, by Charles Brooker, an independent researcher who was using a magnetometer. He spent 2 days making a magnetic survey of the interior of the Rollright circle, and he found, in fact, that there was a spiral pattern of magnetic variation within the ring of stones. And what Rodney has found was found by this man using modern instrumentation. And it is interesting to know that modern science is now confirmed what dowsers have been finding out here for several years now. This is the village of Cairnuni. It dates from the first millennium BC, let's say 700 BC. Many habitations and dwellings, but although it dates from the first millennium BC, its origins are probably much, much older than that. This ancient village of Carnuni harbours a very special secret. It's this strange subterranean stone chamber. It's called, in Cornwall, a fogu. Nobody knows its purpose. Archaeologists originally thought that maybe it was a storage place for grain, but this could never be supported by excavational research. And now it's generally agreed that it's some sort of ritual centre at the heart of the village. And when archaeologists use terms like ritual, it means esoteric, secret, part of the spiritual life of these early peoples. It means they don't know what the real function of this place was all about. As we explore it, though, we can see certain similarities with other structures we do know something about, such as the Pueblo Indian kiva type of structures in the American Southwest, and also a little bit like the stone chambers of the New England area in North America. If we follow this passage around, we come into an open chamber very much like a kiva. One end of the Carnuni fogu is this circular stone chamber, and one feels it was probably the initiatory centre of this ancient community. Once upon a time, of course, it would have had a roof, probably a wattle and turf roof, a distinct advantage on a day like this. We don't know exactly what went on here, but we can be sure this is the spiritual heart of this place, with the ancient and mysterious rites and rituals and understandings of these ancient people.
The ancient builders seem to have been just as interested in the properties of crystals as we are today. There is considerable growing evidence that the ancient builders may have had some special knowledge of the, to us, still mysterious interrelationship between quartz crystals, earth magnetism, and the human body and mind.
One of the more remarkable and dramatic features of this stone circle is this huge quartz block. The rest of the stones at Boscornoon are sarsen stones, but this huge crystal stands out all on its own. It's heavily covered with lichen, which greys it down, but in fact it is one beautiful crystalline block. As one looks closely at it, one can see the glistening crystals all over the stone. And this is very typical of all the prehistoric sites. Either the stones have a high crystalline content, or quartz or some other crystal such as feldspar is included in the site complex. And there does seem to have been this obsession with the prehistoric stone circle builders with the use and the application of crystal. And this is one of the key features that Earth Mysteries researchers are trying to understand, and we suspect that the connection may be to do with consciousness.
Crystals often occur in conjunction with sacred sites, and there are probably a number of reasons for this. First of all, from my own studies in memory, crystals store memory and they amplify memory. This is why traditionally gypsies look in crystal balls. They are consciousness amplifiers. They tend to augment any psychic function which is occurring. Literally, the word to amplify means to make more of, and this is exactly what the crystals do. If you go into a meditative state, they will increase that meditative state. If you go into a healing state, they will increase that healing state. They are augmenters of psychic energy. On a biological level, crystals have a structure, a kind of lattice structure, which is more similar to human cellular structure than any other material on the face of Gaia. So there is an analog, a resonance already between crystals and the human cell. Jacques Monod, a famous French biochemist, pointed this out, a molecular biologist rather. Another aspect of crystals, they were in their memory capacity storage use. For example, in Australia, the medicine men, what they called the clever men, the shamans, what they would do is when they were to initiate a young shaman, they would always take a crystal and make an incision in a part of his abdomen and actually put the crystal in the body and then sew it up with a thorn in some type of fiber. And the idea would be that the shamanic experience was encoded in this crystal. And then when that shaman died and his body decayed, that crystal was taken out and put into the next shaman's body so that there was a transmission of this memory, this wisdom, actually in the face of a crystal. We use crystal in our quartz watches, Silicon Valley, the idea of the whole kind of computer technology, all based on a kind of crystalline structure. Much of the body could be seen exactly as Marcel Vogel talks about, an IBM researcher, as liquid crystal. So we have a lot of consciousness analogs to crystal. And finally, the idea of crystal mythologically was supposed to be kind of the frozen water of heavens. So it had a kind of divine nature to it as well. So we have a number of ways in which we can relate it to sacred sites. We often find quartz crystals in the stones of stone circles or standing stones. We often find crystal balls located at sacred sites and kind of mystical tales of ancient sites and things like that. So there's a whole tradition that has to do with crystal.
The initial studies of Newgrange by serious archaeologists, when it was found that there was a special aperture created at the entrance that allowed a beam of light to come back into the chamber. This was fantastic because there was no doubt here that the ancients were aligning their monument to the rising sun at winter solstice. They had covered the mound with quartz, practically completely with quartz. They must have brought this quartz up from, the nearest place would be 40 miles south in the Wicklow Mountains. And how they got tons and tons of quartz shifted up there still remains fantastic. This was a fantastic effort to get these pieces of quartz up to Newgrange and to assemble this gigantic ritual mound in this way.
This circle is called Dulo. It's in southern Cornwall. Very small in ground plan, but with, as you can see, large stones. The unique characteristic of this circle is that all the stones are pure rock crystal, or white quartz. Some of them look grey because of lichen growth, but they're all white quartz. This is a most dramatic example that we've already mentioned of the use of crystal at these sort of prehistoric sites. Always crystal seems to be involved in some way. Here it is absolutely unambiguously used. And the question is, why did early peoples put so much store in the use of crystals at their sacred sites? Now, there is experimentation going on in various parts of the world into the energy characteristics, the special properties that crystals may have. The question arises why these ancient peoples felt that crystal was so important to put into their ancient sites. Now, there is quite a lot of research going on in various parts of the world, particularly in America and Britain, into the energy characteristics of crystals. And in this country, in Britain, a lot of the work has been pioneered by biologist Harry Oldfield.
Here we have a quartz crystal which is composed of silicon oxide. And the thing is, with the element silicon, it has a sister element, carbon. Now, carbon is an element on which all life on this planet is based. And the reason why I think we get so much reaction between ourselves and stone sites and quartz crystals is because these two elements have an electrical valency which is identical. It's a valency of 4. And it's the only two elements in the periodic table that can do this. But here, in the form of carbon, you've got an element of life which is diverse in many forms. But in silicon, you've got a close symmetrical structure, stability, and non-diversity of form. But because in there the electrical balance is so delicate, it's a knife-edge balance, I can, by bringing my hand close to the quartz crystal, produce some interesting effects. Now, as you can see, Paul, the current changed. But it does take, I'm glad it, do you see that?
It seems to retain something.
It retains something, and this is the property of quartz. Now here we have a very special electromagnetic generator on which on top of is a quartz crystal. This is running on a 12-volt power supply, so everything is very portable for field operation, for experimental purposes. We also have here sockets to monitor radiations on oscilloscopes and pen chart recorders. But when I've already tuned, I hope, this crystal in to its harmonic resonance, and when I switch it on, you will actually hear an audible sound coming from the crystal. And just to prove that's coming from the crystal, you see here, no audible sound. Crystal back on the field, and we have the sound.
So, does this instrument excite the crystal?
It does indeed. And the molecules vibrate enough to produce sound waves. And I believe this is what happened to us when the sun rose on that megalithic morning.
The energy input into the standing stone excited the molecular lattice of the stone, on which we were
particularly
able to
the quartz.
Now, what do we have here?
Well, Paul, here we have a mind mirror,
That's the EEG device.
indeed, hooked up to a crystal.
Well, that's strange because we've been using it on site, of course, hooked up to dowsers to observe their brain rhythms. Surely this machine is designed to work with human beings.
Indeed, but remember, it's a very sensitive piece of apparatus and it will pick up minute changes in electrical forces, not only from inside a person's skull, but from within that crystal as well.
So what have you been finding?
Well, we've been finding that when we have done experiments projecting thoughts and or energy fields from bodies into crystals, we are getting some very interesting reactions, even, shall I say, from a distance with this device.
How far away?
So far, about 15 feet.
Really? Suppose that.
Did you see that some lights change?
There's activity.
There was activity. Now, if I bring my hand close, or rather, Paul, you bring your hand close to the crystal, closer. There's also activity.
What's this? There are lights going on and off here.
Yeah, these are artifact lights that happen to go on when there is sudden surges of electrical activity, which are perhaps the amplifier goes into a clipping mode.
They are used when we're using human subjects for muscular.
Indeed. Now, this is exactly, you can see there's nothing touching the leads, there's no artifacts that's being produced, but this is exactly, as you can see, when my hand gets near.
But crystals don't have muscles, Harry.
No, they don't, but they do have electrical forces inside. And these electrical forces can change polarity, they can change their rhythms through the crystals, their movement through the crystals.
So, is what we're seeing, is the crystal picking up brain rhythms and energy fields?
Most definitely. I believe this to be...
just playing them back through the machine?
Although, Paul, I must emphasise that we've only been able to use this apparatus on